Guys, so good morning, and I am Carrie Muchaw, and this is our third day that Deidre and I have decided to translate yoga poses using pure speech and divine body language. And what we're discussing is what people are finding in yoga classes, and when you are experiencing a pose, what you are actually experiencing by the sensations that are rising in your body. And we're coming back to a remembering of feeling in our poses. And instead of just identifying, oh, I feel this, I have this sensation, this is a pain, or this is my problem area, I just have to work on it, which is a real common phrase that we hear often. And so instead of coming from that, once we identify, I recognize that I'm uncomfortable here, or I struggle here, or what it is that is rising for you that you're feeling in your body, that the moment that you recognize that we're able to translate the pattern that is actually going on to your life, in your belief structure, that is allowing you to have this experience, and how we can shift it and change it so that it actually changes our life and how we experience life. So it's a whole new meaning of taking yoga off your mat and being able to recognize what's happening in your practice and what your body is telling you. And it's been an amazing experience so far. And we are offering yoga teacher training starting at the end of January at Yoga on the Brazos. And I'm super excited about hosting there, as I used to own the studio, and excited that the new owner, Janet's allowing me to come in and be there. And in that, we're going to be doing this exact same process so that yoga instructors can now learn how they can help in a class with people coming into their feeling world and identifying what is truly happening in their bodies and how it can affect their lives and how they can shift that for more glorious. And so I'm going to go ahead and let Dee introduce herself real quickly this morning before we get started.
Good morning. I am Deidre Doggett. I am one of Carrie's students. I took training with her in 2017, and she has so graciously asked me to help with the anatomy portion of the teacher training for the last few years, because in my day job, I am a physical therapist. So I deal a lot with the anatomy of the human body. And I have enjoyed so much how the anatomy world and the yoga world are combining, and especially in this new way that Carrie is navigating. And I'm very excited.
Awesome. And so the first pose we're going to look at this morning is, we are going to look at which pose, Dee?
Triangle. Trikonasana.
Trikonasana. Because
Trikonasana.
yeah, it's found in every most practices. It's very common. We see it a lot. And so what have you noticed, Dee, in class or even in your own practice when you come into triangle?
For me, I'm a big grounder, so I have a difficulty getting into that pose if you have not grounded well through our feet. Because as soon as we extend the arm forward and we feel unsteady on our feet, we lose half of what the pose is going for. I feel very wobbly if I'm not well grounded.
Okay, so one of the things I am going to say, one of the things that Dee said is when we're not grounded through the feet. So, and so I choose to speak into that because commonly when instructors teach class, and Dee and I were actually just discussing this, is that they use the word the foot step, the right foot back, reach the arm forward. And what that is the word the is a separator, because we're asking for you to come back into your feeling world in class, in yoga. So when we say reach your left arm forward and feel your feet, we're beginning to come into our own body. So if I'm speaking on when I'm in class, I'll say step your right foot back, step your left foot back, Reach your left arm forward and feel your arm, because what we're coming into is feelings. And when we say it separates us, because when I just went through a practice of, I just said to D, say the arm and then say my arm, and it's completely different. And so if you're watching, just take a moment and go with me and say the arm, and my arm, my arm. And there's so much more feeling because we are identifying your body part. And then what you just spoke into is feeling balanced. And so what's happening in triangle is you are bending over to the side. Yes. And so on your side, you have a connection inside of your chest, where we're talking about your chest, and your side is moving and doing. So your connection of moving and doing. And when we bend over and we're pivoting, we are stretching out one side, and you may feel one side is contracted. So for example, if I'm hinging over to the left, my left side is contracted and my right side is stretched. So my moving and doing, and the question I have is, when you're feeling unbalanced, are you able to stay as you're moving and doing? So moving and doing is what you're moving and doing in life. And if you're finding struggles, if you're finding you feel off balance in life with what you are moving and doing with what you are doing, because your right side is going to be your doing and stretching it. So are you stretching everything that you're doing, and then you feel perhaps you're stretched too far? You feel people, I'm stretched too far, I'm stretched out too far, 1,000 things going on in your life, and you feel that you're not balanced. Because the word that you used was, I find that I have to be grounded.
Right. I need to feel solid first before I can stretch myself.
And feeling solid is feeling secure.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, and one of the things Dee in particular has spoken a lot into is support in her family life. And because we've spoken to that in Camel, is remembering that in drawing in her support and allowing herself to be supported, instead of Dee has the role of, with the belief she has in the past, had the belief that she had to do everything. And so, and we find that a lot in society, where women, mothers, people that feel they're in charge at work, bosses, men that are in charge of something at work. I mean, it doesn't just go across the feminine plane, but I do find it a lot where we feel as though we're the doer. We've got to do everything. And instead of stretching and feeling secure in what you're doing. And when we feel secure, stable, we have our security. When we're secure in what we're doing, we're allowing ourselves to have support. Because if you're going to do it all yourselves, I mean, there always comes a time where doing everything yourself gets tiring. Gets fatigued, often frustrated, whatever that begins to look like. But here in this pose, we are recognizing security in moving and doing. And then if you're going to go to the other side, this is going to be receiving. On the left side is receiving when you are moving and doing. So because when you're moving and doing things, we require receiving and we require giving. So it requires both. And if we're not allowing ourselves to receive security in what we're doing, then we're going to be off course. Because and you can go even deeper as to what is security mean to you. And everybody can tend to be a little different on that. However, we all know when we feel secure that we are supported, and that's when it makes that movement. And what else is happening in tree? And I was going to say in tree. I just jumped into triangle. What else is happening?
I think what a lot of us try to do is we try to go all the way, and that means getting your fingertips to the floor.
Mm.
And, I always encourage the use of a block for that. And I'm always intrigued by how many of us think we don't need it, or it's like a crutch, when it's such a tool to use, especially in a pose like this, because we try to get our fingertips to the floor, or we rest very heavily on our shin. And you know what that does to the knee. That tends to lock out the knee.
To your knee or the knee?
And the knee, your knee. See, I'm still learning too.
Yeah, and we are. So yes, so your knee is such a really important thing here because, for example, if you're doing triangle to the left side, commonly people lock their knee out. And we discussed on tree what happens when you lock your knee out. You press all of the weight into your joint, which is all of your weight into relationships and having relationships locked in place, that they're only one way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're remembering of bending your knee slightly. And what that brings in is all of your power in your support. And yes, what does the block represent? Is the block represents support. And yes, like you said, I see so often people see it as a weakness. It's a weakness to have support. And often if people are not leaning on are not allowing themselves to utilize the block, you're often going to find that you'd ask those people the question because, are you allowing support in? Because often on the individuals that are not going to put their hand on the block, they're not allowing support in. And so you have the question, are you willing to allow support in? And with that, I use that because if you notice, with that decree, I said, and I asked the question, are you willing to let support in? And the decree is, I can willingly let support in. And I use the word will here because in this position, your abdominals are required to be engaged and do some work. And often people, the other thing they do is lock their knee out. We have relationships only one way. And then we will lean all the way over to the floor, to our leg, maybe even to the block, to their block. And when they're leaning all the way and all that, they've let their abdominals go. And that may be having relationships locked in place and believing that only it was going to require somebody else to do something. It means you require with the belief that the outside world has to do something in order for you to be able to do something, move forward in life. It's codependency on the outside world. Well, I can't do anything because they're not doing anything. Instead of claiming their will, that's why I use the I will, and how simply that is done with just that. I willingly allow my support in. That's it. It's that simple, because in that movement, you've got support underneath of your feet, your security. You've allowed yourself to let it in, and your will is going to be your abdominal muscles, because the moment that you ignite the fire, what we call the fire in the belly in your third chakra, it's the moment that you engage your will, you have a complete new perspective, because there is no power over you that you're waiting on somebody else. You're leaning in, you've got your relationships. This is the only way, locked in place. You're removing that belief and allowing yourself to step into your will. And I can allow my support in. And the moment we come into that decree and we claim that for ourselves, so much opens up.
Right. Oh, this goes beautifully with what the term we use in the clinic, and that's hanging on your ligaments. And that's just your body relying solely on soft tissue that's meant to be there as a backup behind your muscles. Instead, what we're doing a lot of the time, like you just said, we're hanging in there. Our abdominals are shut off. And I know you felt this, but if you're in triangle, you take pressure, weight off of your bottom hand, and all of a sudden you have this massive core engagement. You know, if you've taken that triangle pose where you take your bottom arm and you reach it forward and then you're still in the triangle shape, but all of a sudden you are fully engaged in the muscles that we should have been using to begin. But a lot of times we get into the pose relying on our ligaments to get us there, and we're just hanging out.
And what's the definition of a ligament? And D, what is the anatomical definition of a ligament? What would you say a ligament is?
So it's very tense, soft tissue. So we have muscles that attach to bones through tendons, and there's some extensibility to that. Ligaments don't have much stretch. And if we're not using muscles and tendons as our first line of support, we're relying on these ligaments to hold us together. And over time, they get stretched too thin and they lose their strength. So, for example, if you have repeat ankle sprains, you have stretched your ligaments. And the more you stretch your ligaments, the weaker they become. And over time, we lose the sense of proprioception, that we have just lost awareness to that. And we become a lot more unsteady, and the joints wear out much more quickly when we lose that. So we need the muscle engagement first and foremost. Ligaments are our backup. And if without that, the joints wear out.
And in the tissue
Mm-hmm.
is where memories are stored.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I ask what it means, because you said that, what was the verbiage that you use in the clinic for your
Hanging
ligament?
on the ligaments.
Hanging on ligament.
Hanging on.
How many people are hanging on to a memory? How many people are hanging on to a memory that doesn't support them? And that's what you're seeing right there in triangles, hanging on to something that is not supporting them. And, you know, often we don't even realize, and that's why your body can hold on to things as you start moving things out, which is why yoga is important, because your body can hold on to things as you start decreeing and as you start moving the energy of what was your belief, which is hanging on to a memory perhaps that you do have to rely on other people to get things done, or there's only relationship this one way. And when we begin to shift, what happens is our body in the tissue can store that memory that we didn't even realize we had. And it stores a memory perhaps of when you did believe on this situation. I remember I had to wait for them before I could do this. And perhaps there was trauma around it. And what we're finding in yoga is that when we do your physical movements inside of your body, then, and finding these patterns, then we're able to stay in these positions a little bit longer and allow it to release. And often it doesn't even require that people speak into, well, that was a memory when I was 3 years old and it will just come up. And we can say, I give myself permission to let go, and it's released. And that's when we and often in yoga, and I choose to know that you'll find in yin yoga practices and in poses when we hold poses longer, we actually are experiencing myofascial tissue release. And when we're finding those holds of 3 minutes, and perhaps in triangle, that's a challenge. However, what we're noticing is we may touch it several times in our triangle pose, and then we experience a big release. And that's why the phrase of the tissue here and staying in a memory, and that we can come in and let that go, and how awesome your yoga practice is for you. Once you recognize these things, you bring them to the surface and we can release them.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff.
That's
Especially like you were saying, when you stay in there long enough, because if you're in a flow class, you may not be in a pose long enough to fully feel.
yes, it's gonna, and for many of us, it takes a moment to reconnect to feeling, and so it is going to take for a yoga instructor to allow their class to breathe and stay, because even
Mhm.
in a flow, what we're got to find or what I choose to empower people to find and remember, is that if you do 3 poses in a flow and then come back into your pose and stay, because we're going to be required to touch uncomfortable many times. So I always say we're going to have to, it's going to require you have an agreement to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
that means making your adjustments, breathing, and allowing yourself to stay. So you can put a few poses in after or before as movement, perhaps, and shaking it off. As I find sometimes people are like, oh, this is a lot, and you have to go, it's okay. You remind yourself, wait a second, the end game is glorious and I can. So you use those a few poses to shake it off and then recommit to the pose again to see what else is new and different there. And I know often yoga teachers will teach a pose and come back to it and ask people, have you noticed any change? And what we're doing now is we're going deeper than just have you noticed any change. It's when we're meeting them with reminding them in triangle pose that I willingly allow my support and I move forward with support. When we're imagining and bringing that into them so that they start bringing that in, then their experience will be new and different. It'll be new and different on the physical form. However, it's the emotional state will allow the triangle to, now I just love tree triangle to be freeing instead of constrictive or anything like that. And so new and different once again.
And another thing is getting us to be comfortable with doing a little less in order to stay longer. So, like I was saying earlier, that a lot of us have that need to get our fingertips all the way down to the inside of the ankle, all the way to the foot. But in actuality, where I would need to be is somewhere at my knee or even at my thigh, so that I can really engage and stay there longer and feel what I should be feeling, and not achieve the look that I'm trying to aesthetically pull off.
Yes, because and what that says to us is I'm going to meet myself right where I am.
Mm-hmm.
Because right where you are, how small you may perceive a triangle is, but meeting yourself and being gentle with yourself and meeting yourself right where you are is going to allow for so much more movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about upgrades in life. I'm talking about, when I say movement, I'm saying, yes, movement in life and
Mm-hmm.
movement in the pose. It is for us to meet ourselves, because how often have we judged ourselves? I can't even put my hand down. I can't put my hand down. And that's not where we are, because to your point, coming back and perhaps making the movement smaller and allowing yourself to feel is so much better than disengaging other muscles and leaning on your block and locking out your knee and allowing yourself to step into a belief of that it has to be this way, because that's a belief that it has to be this way. And
Mm-hmm.
how profound is that? Are you walking around in the world and saying, well, it has to be this way. This is the way it is. It has to be this way.
Right. And I've been doing yoga long enough, and I'm a little older now, and yoga is a long game for me. And I don't want to be abusing my tissues just for the sake of a pose. I want to be happy doing less that's going to serve my body longer. It's the principle of Ahimsa, right? It may not be harmful in the moment, but if I'm doing the same thing class after class, year after year, what am I doing long term to my body?
Yes, and so she brings up Ahimsa, and well, I was just discussing the Yoga Sutras a few days ago with Wendy, who's doing the history and yoga teacher training, and we were talking about Ahimsa and nonviolent. The Ahimsa means nonviolence, and yes, and you're stating that long term, and I choose to change. I choose to empower you to change your language, because a want is something you put on a Christmas list, and doesn't have much energy. So a desire is going to be filled more with a desire to have a practice that continues and grows with you as you grow and change. And
Mhm.
that's so wonderful. And in Ahimsa, with nonviolence, what we're recognizing is putting yourself, what you believe is, further into a pose because something you've seen on the outside world is really violent for yourself. Because we also often will hear the word violence and think something really what we feel is extreme, by murder and things on TV and things like that. Like the violence is punching holes in the walls and things of that nature. However, that's not it, because violence, what we're seeing here, is putting yourself in a place where you're not ready to go, and not allowing yourself at that point to meet yourself right where you are. And that's what we're coming to, is being gentle with myself and allowing myself to stay right where I am and feel. And when you do that, the glorious memories that are going to come up for you from your tissue, for you to be able to let go of and transform. I mean, there's gold in there. That's what we always say. There's a little bit of gold in everything. And so you can find your gold when you stay with it and meet yourself right where you are.
Mhm.
What else are we finding in tree pose? Like when you look, I mean, tree pose, boy, howdy, I am just all in
Okay.
love with that tree. It's from the other day. I'm still growing. That's what it is. I'm growing. I'm growing. From triangle, what else have you seen in class? Because there's more in
There's
triangle.
a lot. I mean, we're not going to cover it all, but another biggie for me is what I see our shoulders doing in our reaching arm. And that's a lot of the time it tips forward, and we're putting the shoulder in a very vulnerable space because we are so challenged by the rotation around the rib cage. So it's our reaching here and a lack of movement here.
Mhm.
And
So
that requires so much of the spine, because in our triangle there is a huge side bend that needs to happen, and a lot of us have a loss of that, and that then takes our rib cage and we're looking down at the floor. So we have this disconnection between the side bending availability and then our arm extending. So there's a big loss of movement in the heart space.
Okay. So the key phrase in that when it came out was the reach. So with your arm reaching, and I use the phrase of extending because there's nothing we're required to reach for. So, I mean, and how often is it that we believe we have to reach out to get something? And so when you're going for a reach, you're reaching out, which is reaching to the outside world to achieve something, reaching to the outside world to allow your heart to expand with a belief that there's something again on the outer. Anytime, so that's a cue that for me I've taken out of my language too, is reach, because I've noticed I kept saying reach and I was going, I was ever remembering that there is nothing to reach for. It's all on the inner for me to claim. So this is coming from a place of expansion and
Mhm.
expanding and spreading your fingers far apart and allowing yourself to expand more and feel all the way down into your heart space. Because when you have a rotation of your shoulder and you're going down, so here's we're going to do the whole arm. So if you're going to rotate down, you may often find your hand with your thumb going down.
Turns back.
And your thumb is your will.
Mm-hmm.
And when we rotate our hand down, we're putting our will down instead of allowing it to rise and shine and allowing ourselves to expand our will and allow our hearts to shine. So trusting that you can allow your love to shine. So it's an expansion, and I willingly allow my heart to shine. I willingly allow my love to be seen, because shining is going to be seen around. And when people rotate this way, we're putting it down. And instead of opening up and cancel, not opening, instead of expanding and allowing your heart to shine.
And there's a lot of connection between how our arm extends and what our head is doing. If I'm looking this way, away, if I'm looking down at the floor in our triangle, and then I'm extending with this arm, I am limiting myself. If I look forward or turn and look up towards my upper hand, I get a ton more expansion from that. So how we orient our head and where we're looking is going to allow us even more expansion. If we're looking away or, preoccupied with something else, or we're relying on that stability that we didn't have through our feet, now we're having to look at the floor for that extra security, we've lost that expansion. So that the setup, goes back to the setup where I require so much of that initial grounding through the feet, so I feel stable, so that I can work the upper body, my upper body, in the way that I desire.
And the focus on that of the movement of your head and stating where you're looking, and that's really profound here, because we're bringing apart the shine of your heart and you're looking. And you said you have to be really secure in order to adjust how you're looking. And it's very telling, because yes, when we are secure, then when we talk about looking, it's about being seen and how we see things, and allowing ourselves to be fully seen, allowing our heart to shine. And I am secure in being seen, and I give myself permission to see. And it's seeing new and different. It's seeing light shining. It's seeing your love expanding. You're seeing. And so, yes, when we're secure, we allow our hearts to be seen. It is very, many of these poses that we've been doing, they've all been standing, and there's security involved in all of it. And it is so profound to claim your security, because the question I ask is, are you secure in seeing? Or have you been looking away from whatever you've been seeing because you don't want to touch it, you don't want to see it, you don't want to look at it, you don't want to identify it? That's not it.
Right. And this is a huge thing that I see in the clinic and in class, is how much difficulty or even lack of awareness that we have of where our head is. So if in triangle, and we have our arms set in the pose, but then our head just kind of like falls. when the head is just an extension. Our head is an extension of our spine, and there we need the support here. This is like, consider this like another core. So you have to have your core to support your spine, but then we have this head, this bowling ball attached to our body that we need support from. So we have such a lack of orientation of our head in space, and how much support that we could be working on, and how we place our head in these poses. So, your will pose, your massive will pose, your plank pose, that's another one. But even more so in this pose where we're oriented to the side, and then you see the head that just falls off. Mm-hmm.
And that's so your neck is your connection between your knowing and your doing. And so often when people have neck stuff, I'll say to them, what is it that you're supposed to be doing and you're not?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the connection between head and heart, and following our heart. And often people will know in their heart and feel in their heart they should be doing it, but they're not doing it. Mm-hmm. So they know it, but they're not doing it. So the connection between knowing and doing, you give up.
Mm-hmm.
You give up, you bail out, have you been giving up on what you should be doing, with some belief underneath of it that it's not possible. Maybe you're not strong enough, whatever your belief is behind that. But that's what that's telling. That's the question that I would ask is, what is it that you should be doing? Or feel you should be doing?
Or speaking, this is 6. What's the number? What number is this?
5.
It's blue.
6, 7, 5.
5.
Yes. Yes, and in expression though, commonly it's not. We're not going to have people bowing to the left or the right. Commonly, if it's something that they're speaking, you're going to find something different, and you may find what reaction they're making in their face may tell you a lot about their expression. When I see this, I mean, what that is expression is beginning to come. It's mm-hmm. coming. They're blowing it out. It's coming. If they're biting their lip, if they're doing this in the pose, they're holding back. That's when you start to see expression in a fifth chakra, is they're holding back. So if you see people, then they're holding back on their expression. That's what that's telling us. Or if their cheeks turn real red, or their chin turns real red, and people will tell me, "Oh, I just have rosacea." Okay, sure you do. But what it is it's expression, and it's not being seen. Mm-hmm. And if it happens in certain movements, it can definitely be correlated to the pattern of not being comfortable being seen. And that's why this pose is really, because it's an opening of your heart, and we're focusing on cancel clear, not an opening, cancel clear. It is an expansion of your heart, and it's a remembering of your gaze. And are you allowing your love to shine? Are you allowing your love to be seen? Are you allowing your love to support your moving and doing? Are you loving what you're moving and doing with? Are you loving it? That's a question, because if you're going, I've got this great expansion here, but it hurts on the side. Well, are you loving it, or are you having some sort of contraction around what you are doing in your life?
Or just tolerating?
Yeah. Because tolerating is tolerating your highest choice.
Yeah.
It is?
Yes, no.
It is? I'm like, what?
No, heck no.
Yes, no. And tolerating is not our highest choice. So yes, if we feel as though we're tolerating something for right now, which is never your highest choice, there's not a time and space where tolerating serves us. Instead, we are to live gloriously. And this is what is happening in our practice is we're finding all of the language that we've been saying to ourselves. And
Yeah.
now we can change that. We can change that. And remembering ease here, because if I've also found that people, when they're pivoting into triangle, will hold their breath because you have your rib cage right here and your lungs right underneath of it, and they'll hold their breath, or they'll I'm having trouble breathing. And so are you having, and breath is life. There's no trick in that one. Breath is life. And if you're holding your breath, are you hunkering down through what you're doing, or are you really loving life? Because we're here to love life. And when people hold their breath, they're they are not loving life. They're not experiencing the joy in life. And so we're of the remembering, I can love my life, and I can love every minute of every hour of every day. And that's what we're seeing in class. And so we're remembering.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I believe we've addressed many things in your triangle pose and how glorious it is. And so I choose to know, I imagine Dee and I will do another one of these because we're just, we're excited. We're excited. So we're going to go ahead and post this one today. And I had attempted the Facebook Live. It appears as though it was starting, and I imagine it moved away, and that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and post this on YouTube and post it out so that everybody can see it. And feel free to comment. I'm going to send it out in the newsletter as well. And feel free to comment on any poses that you guys would choose to have translated. Send us a note, post underneath of it, post on Facebook on Carrie Muchaw Life Upgrade Coach page. And let's explore the new and different and what we're finding in poses, and begin to experience a yoga pose and notice what is happening for you. What are you feeling? And we begin with a simple I feel. I feel. Instead of getting into your head of, well, I believe this is this and that's that. And we're not going into that, as we're going into I feel, and noticing what you are feeling as you are in a pose in Trikonasana here. So awesome. So thank you so much for everybody tuning in, and we'll be back again. Thanks, Dee.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Namaste.
Namaste.
And let's see.